We're really excited to be joined with Doug Hubbard, a renowned expert and author of How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. And we're excited to kind of have a Q&A with him today. So I guess the first question we would ask, Doug, is how did you get into cybersecurity risk and how did you get into risk in general?
Well, I started out at Coopers & Lybrand before it was PricewaterhouseCoopers, right? So that was 33 years ago, and I've always been in some form of quantitative management consulting. So the director of management consulting in the group that I was working in, he was a Rand Corporation guy, and he looked at everything as a quantitative problem, and I did too. So I got to apply a lot of things that I learned in grad school to those sorts of issues. But I noticed that along the way, we would deal with clients that would just state that something was immeasurable, intangible. I was a brand new MBA, I just believed them, right? So, well, okay, you're the expert, I'm just a brand new MBA, I don't know. But sometimes I knew that we would be challenged with that. Somebody would say something was intangible or immeasurable when we had just measured that very thing in a previous client.
Yeah.
And so I just started to doubt after a while if people really knew what they were talking about when they said that something was immeasurable. And eventually I decided there's only a few reasons why anybody ever thought anything was immeasurable, and they're all illusions. So I wrote about them in the first book. So after collecting a lot of notes for a lot of years about anecdotes that I saw and how to actually solve exactly those problems that people would come up with, I decided to write my first book, which was just how to measure anything, period. It was how to measure anything, finding the value of intangibles in business was the full title. So I was talking about difficult measurement problems in general. I was telling people, look, measurement, number one, doesn't mean an exact number. It means an uncertainty reduction based on observation and quantitatively expressed. That's the way it's used, the de facto term in science and in decision theory too. So that's the pretty practical method of thinking about that. Sometimes things seem immeasurable because people weren't even sure what they were naming. Like reputation damage comes up all the time in cybersecurity. What do you mean by reputation damage? What do you see when you see more of it, etc.? When people start to define things in terms of their observable consequences, I say that they're halfway to measuring it. The rest is trivial math. And then I talk about the methods of measurement. There's a lot of misconceptions about the kinds of inferences you can make from even just a few observations. The math is pretty clear on this, and we know we're better off making better bets even with just a little bit more information. So when I talked about those typical obstacles to overcome, and I saw that a lot of people were running into these issues, I saw that it led to people measuring all the wrong things just because they didn't know how to measure some things. They knew how to measure some things, and they would ignore all these really high value measurements. So they'd spend a lot of time in, say, IT measuring near-term development costs, but they would ignore things like chance of cancellation or long-term benefits, etc. Those were the higher information value variables, by the way. So I became interested in applying this to a lot of different areas. At first, it was large IT projects, big uncertain, what's the benefit of this new software, etc. I branched out into a lot of other areas, big engineering projects, environmental policy, things like this. Cybersecurity came along because it seemed like that was an area that's actually using all the stuff I tried to debunk in the first book. So I wrote about that later. That was my fourth book. So I just felt it was an area that needed a lot of improvement. And I thought the kinds of methods that my team and I were using all the time applied to cybersecurity. It's not a different kind of risk. It's a risk just like all the other risks.
Yeah, one of the things that we are excited about is there used to be this old saying that you couldn't prove the return on investment for cybersecurity because you can't make things fail. Like you don't know when you're going to get hacked, and it's all this unknown. You can't prove the unknown. So that's where we're like, hey, that's not true, right? We can actually show whether things are working or not, and then use that to inform your portfolio optimization, to inform your investments, to really kind of understand this is working, but this is not, and this is an engineering problem or an investment problem, and then make new and much better decisions based on this previously assumed to be unprovable sort of calculation.
Yeah, I think first off, there's a kind of an error that's made when people assume that the objective is proof and certainty and an exact number. all we have to do is outperform what you were doing before.
Yeah.
It's an irrational move to say that because I can't prove something for certain, I'm not even going to try to reduce my uncertainty at all.
Right.
If that were the case, then the insurance industry wouldn't exist.
Right.
On an individual basis, they can't prove for certain when they're going to make a life insurance claim pay out on me.
Right.
I haven't died yet.
Right.
So you could say they have no data on my rate of death other than I haven't died yet. So how do they do that? How does the insurance industry exist?
Right.
All they have to do is measurably outperform intuition. Intuition and whatever qualitative methods people might be using. Those things have a measurable performance too.
Yeah.
And all of these issues about uncertainty and the lack of data and ambiguity, none of them are alleviated by a risk matrix.
Right.
Or our intuition.
Right.
So there's actually a kind of fallacy I talk about in the books, ex apero ursus.
Yeah.
It's Latin for beat the bear.
Yeah.
So there's actually some research behind this now, but I came up with this term first, ex apero ursus, and later found out there's research that actually supported this idea. But beat the bear is based on that joke.
Yeah.
Two hikers getting ready to go hike in the woods, and one
Right.
guy's got running shoes on.
Yeah.
His buddy says, "Why are you wearing running shoes?" He said, "Well, I heard there were bears in the woods. I wanted to be able to run faster." His buddy with the hiking boots says, "Well, that's absurd. You can't outrun a bear anyway."
Yeah.
He says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you."
Yeah.
So the ex apero ursus fallacy is assuming that just because something can't be proven or certain or perfect,
Right.
that I therefore should default to a clearly inferior model
Right.
that doesn't alleviate any of the problems that we just got done talking about.
Right.
All we have to do is be marginally better. I need to be better by enough to justify the cost of that risk analysis. That's what I need to do.
Yeah.